What's up, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Real Talk. This is a new thing that Kelly and I decided to do for the kind of off-the-wall topics that people wanted us to cover. And today we've got a guest, Brittany.
Hi.
She has a channel on YouTube called Brittany Simon, where she covers things from sex tips to BDSM to polyamory to just being happy with yourself and crazy makeup tutorials and whatever.
And all those links, her link will be in the description so you guys can check her out.
And if you're too impatient for that, Brittany Simon, I believe, is the channel name.
Yes.
So we put out a Q&A to the viewers, listeners, however they consume this show. And like I said, just before we started, I expected some real troll questions because we were like, anything like bisexuality, polyamory, BDSM, sex tips. And Kelly's viewers, you know who you are. Like we
They're
had some
pretty wild, but
expectations
you guys
of you
took it very seriously. You're very mature.
Yeah, I was like, we might have to screen these questions, like beforehand. But you guys took it serious, so good job. So why don't you tell us a bit about you, what you do, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. So my name is Brittany. I've been, on YouTube for about a decade, flipping from just political things to lifestyle things. And then within the last 6 years, I've been heavily involved in BDSM and poly and all of these things. And a bunch of my viewers started to ask me those specific questions. And I realized I could really help people discover themselves in the ways that I had discovered myself. And so I started talking about it in a, this is how I've done it. This is how I recommend doing it. And one thing led to another. And my audience is amazing. Like, if you want to talk about audiences that really want to know, they really want to know how to be happy and live authentically and do it successfully. We talk primarily about the United States, but a lot of my audience is international, which is amazing. And one of the, common questions is just how to live your everyday life in a way that's compatible with the outside society without feeling so much like an outcast. And it's actually really simple in a lot of ways. And so I help people do that. I also talk about politics and how it affects living alternatively, because people forget every law that goes and, gets enacted in the United States will affect your everyday life. Like BDSM is technically illegal in the United States because it's a form of torture. So if people and assault. So people, if people forget, especially young teenagers who write me, that you cannot participate in this lifestyle without understanding the law. So that's what I try to help people do.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Kelly's like,
what? I'm fine.
So
that sounds good to me. Like I think that's something like teenagers wouldn't think about. They wouldn't consider the law. They just think about, ooh, sexy time, but you have to consider other things too.
Well, they forget about getting injured and needing health insurance and not being able to see a doctor. And
very true.
Yeah, and obviously, like with the rise of like the whole 50 Shades thing, BDSM has become a bit more mainstream, and with that has brought a bit more. It's a bit more acceptable. It's still very taboo because they didn't exactly portray it in the best way. But let's start with the basics. What does BDSM mean?
BDSM stands for bondage, discipline, sadism, masochism. It can be debated amongst kinksters or BDSMers exactly what the focus should be in that description. With the influx of new 50 Shades of Grey viewers coming in, a lot of people associate BDSM with sex, which is traditionally technically taboo in a larger sense of the community. There are plenty of people who don't even involve sex in their kink, like myself, because it is about the sadism or the masochism, which is derived from pain and giving plainest pleasure. So that's a little interesting. So just something I want to throw out there to you.
That's cool. I've, I worked as a pro dom when I was going through college, and obviously there was no sex there. Nothing went in any hole, no matter how much they wanted it. But with women, I definitely involve sex with BDSM.
Why do you think that is?
Why do I think it is? I don't know. They're cute when they were like wiggling. Boobs popping everywhere. You can't not. I mean, come on.
I mean, you're preaching to the choir, so like I get you.
Yeah, it's like it should be, But a lot of people, they're not comfortable with it. They don't know where to start. you know, in England, everyone, you know, around their 18th birthday, especially amongst girls, they get their furry handcuffs as the joke gift. But often the case for some people, that's kind of where it starts. Where would you recommend someone who's kind of interested in exploring that part of themselves? Where would you recommend them starting out?
So I would recommend going to as many events as you physically can and meeting people who've been in the scene a little longer than 5 years. I find that physically going to events is probably your best bet because you're seeing people actually live it versus people experiencing it online, which is still a viable option for people who don't have large communities. But if your information is coming from Tumblr, which is extremely pornified, and the misinformation there is just going to guide you into a black hole. I mean, I get constant letters from young people who say, I've been talking to a dom online. They want me to drop my whole life and come live with them. And all I have to do is give them my paycheck. And I'm sitting here like, no,
don't do
that. Don't do that, because the first thing about BDSM that you have to know is that, yes, it's risk-aware kink, but it's also safe, sane, and consensual. And you have to know what you're consenting to. So you can't just have this blurred concept of what information you see online. So my recommendation is to go to fetlife.com, which is currently the #1 kink social website. It's kind of like kinky Facebook. Now, there is an influx of misinformation on there as well, but that's mostly in the forum section. So if you go to your local events based off your zip code that you provide, FetLife. I'm not being sponsored by them. This is just the website that everyone has to use.
It's the only website, guys. Stay away from Colony and all of that. They're bullshit. That's where you're going to get into trouble. FetLife at least is pretty well moderated.
It's moderated. When you host an event, someone has to take responsibility for hosting. You can blame someone. There's rules, there's dress codes. And most of it is done in public events. Most munches will be done in public bars, public restaurants, and this is for safety. This allows people to enter into an event, feel uncomfortable or comfortable, and decide if they want to stay or not. And then they can just leave. And this way you come in vanilla street clothing. Nobody knows you're that kinky bastard sitting in the corner who masturbates to furries. Like, it's not about that. It's about it's about finding yourself in a comfortable space. So head to FetLife, look at local events based off your zip code, and have fun. Also take a friend or have a speed dial friend that you call, just in case.
Yeah, and for those in England, a lot of the big towns, Birmingham, Bristol, London, Leeds, etc., they have monthly fetish markets, which are a great place to meet. You can go dressed up or you can go vanilla. And there's also plenty of munches, usually at a local pub. And usually on the events page on FetLife, it will be like, look for the teddy bear on the table. That's us, you know. It's not like kinky bastards meet here. So it's a completely vanilla setting, you know. It might be a bit of a wink to the dude at the bar, but yeah, that's about it. It's pretty safe.
Yeah, I think like cities here too have like a lot of events too. Chicago has a lot. I know that. How about, is there basic etiquette someone should be aware of?
Yes, actually, there is. This is why BDSM is so fun for me, is that it's a culture. It has a tradition. It's got the way that you speak and walk and talk allows you to know your place in a way that might be really difficult for socially awkward people. Like, I get extreme anxiety in large crowds. Like, normally, if I'm on top, I can feed it. But if I'm going into a totally odd situation that I don't know what to expect, it's nice that BDSM kind of gives you this is what you can expect. So example, one of the things that makes us stand out is that you're not obligated to touch people in BDSM. So something as simple as a handshake can be rejected and not mean anything offensive. So usually people will say, do you shake? And then you can shake hands, but someone's allowed to say, very nice to meet you. If you don't mind, I'm not touching anyone tonight. You know, and this allows, even in vanilla settings, people just to have a better option. And that allows you just to feel a little bit more in control of a very, intimidating situation. Now, there are protocol specific events that would cause you to act completely different than you would at a bar, but those are usually specified in the like event calendar. So if you're going to a high protocol party, like I'm going to this weekend, you would experience a very specific atmosphere, you know, kneeling, and there would be words like sir and, you know, mistress being used. There would be, you don't talk to anyone submissive. That's collared. But those things are learned. Like you wouldn't go to a bar munch and need to know that stuff just yet. Somebody would be able to ease you into it. But if you show up to a high protocol party, you should ask probably the person in charge, hey, what's the decorum for tonight? And they can kind of run you through it. Don't feel intimidated about not going because you don't know these things. Someone is always willing to help you. It's actually one of the best parts about the community. People want more of us. So they're always like, please come into my like little cabin. Let me feed you pie. Like, you know, they're really excited. So don't worry about that so much. But yeah, there are things. But they're learned over time.
Yeah, and don't, whatever you do for your first party or event, go to a high protocol event. Most of the time you probably wouldn't get in anyway, because a lot of them require a couple of referrals to even get your name on the list. But yeah, munches are a great way, FetLife, blah, blah, blah. Let's get back to questions. Explain safe, sane, and consensual.
So safe, sane, and consensual is kind of the counterpart to risk-aware kink. And it's the philosophy that you should be literally safe. So you should think about what you're doing and the risk factors. You should be sane, which is up for debate philosophy-wise. A lot of people with mental illness feel like, what if they're not safe enough to play with or sane enough? But I would argue that as long as you know what your conditions are and you're taking medication or you're aware and you can consent, you're fine. So safe, sane, and then consensual is just the I consent to this action beforehand or during a scene with specific words in mind. I think a lot of people forget because vanilla culture, at least in the US, has been so focused on like using, drinking courage, alcohol to make yourself more sociable. But in BDSM, you're not allowed drugs or alcohol. You have to make every decision sober. So you have to know exactly what you're doing. And it's the most amazing and freeing and wonderful part about the community, because in the morning when you regret it, it's just a regret and it's not a horrible situation that's going to lead you to question everything about yourself. And there are ways to avoid things like if you go to a dungeon, and it's a good dungeon, you've got monitors who will listen for safe words. So if you're in the middle of a scene and you say red, which means stop, and your person topping you or doming you at the moment isn't stopping because they're a bad person, somebody will come to your rescue. And it's kind of this amazing, weird concept. I'm in Seattle where there's multiple dungeons, but one in particular has like 40,000 members. We have parties 7 days a week. We have 3,000 active members monthly. Like, it's crazy to think about how many different types of people are coming in, and you have to keep tabs on those people. So you have to make sure that everyone understands that you are adults, that you have to know what you're consenting to, and that it's okay when things don't go necessarily perfect, but there are ways to avoid it. Here's the language. We're giving you the language to avoid heartache. It's kind of cool. I like it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was about to mention, like, there are dungeon monitors and stuff like that for everyone's safety. And honestly, like, this is a rule we used to say in England because some of the clubs were a bit kind of underground. If you go to a fetish party and they're serving alcohol, walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, the dogs are barking. I'm trying to shut them up.
I can't hear them. I can't hear them. If that helps. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's great. I'm trying to think. So we've got that. We've done safe, sane, and consensual. And we've already covered what's your advice for, heading to play with someone for the first time. Now, we took that in a party scene. Let's take it as an individual. Say you've met someone, you've met them for coffee. Please don't just go and play with someone without meeting them multiple times first. And you're ready for that big jump. You're going to go and get tied up, fucked, and beaten senseless. What is your advice for someone... Okay, maybe that's how I work. Who's going to play with someone for the first time?
Well, that advice you have of meeting them a few times prior, especially in a vanilla setting, is important. There is a thing called pickup play, and it's pretty prevalent here in Seattle. It's not always what I would recommend doing with harder scenes, like being tied up. I think people think of being tied up as like the beginning steps, but think about it. You are literally incapable of moving or running away. Like, you're about to die. Like, if it's the wrong person. So think about that as like I'm actually extremely that's a extreme play for me where I'm like, you want to tie me up now? What's happening? And but that's something to think about. My recommendation is honestly learn how to negotiate, which purely means learn to ask for what you want and stand your ground when it's a hard limit. And a hard limit is something that just you don't want to do and you don't even want to discuss it really. Now, a soft limit could be something that you are questioning and you're not sure about and you're not quite ready for, but you have the right in this community to say, I don't want to do that. And if they make you feel bad for it, they're the bad guy. Like that's not the way that I was raised or conditioned growing up in social settings and like vanilla culture where the pressure is on, where people can, push you into a corner. That is completely not socially acceptable in BDSM or kink. So one of the things that I would just keep in mind is that if that's a skill you might have to learn. I notice that a lot of people don't actually know how to say no. And no is a complete sentence in BDSM. So if somebody comes up to you and says, hi, you're really beautiful. I love the way your titties look in that top, because let me tell you, that's the first thing they always say. I would love to play with you. You can just be like, no.
Yeah, that's it. The thing is, I think the hardest thing, when I've had like subs, is subs, not always, there are some very strong-willed ones out there, but sometimes they're more socially awkward. They're a little shy because they're kind of in their subby role, surrounded by things, a bit overwhelmed by everything that's going on. So they find it a little harder to communicate. Now, a good Dom will sit down and be like, okay, what experiences have you had? What did you like? What didn't you like? These are the kind of things I might do to you. What are your feelings about this? Have you experienced this before? Is any of that a no? And usually someone would work from there. If you have a Dom and you're not experienced and they know that, who says, just what are your hard limits? You need to kind of take control of that situation. A Dom in general will get most of the information out of you, but sometimes you still have to have the balls to say, I don't do this, I don't do this, and I don't do this. There are a lot of subs out there who don't like anything around their neck, don't like pressure on their neck and things like that. Yet submissives in general, you think about that and you think collar around the neck. So you have to get good at communication, whether that's you practicing saying no in the mirror or you practicing verbalizing what you do and don't like. But please always be honest.
Yes. And one of the things I recommend doing is, and I know this is hard for a lot of people because they get really excited. They go to their first event and they just want to jump right into it. But I would give myself like a 24-hour to 72-hour waiting period of, do I actually want to play with this person? Is this something I want to do? Or did I just feel pressured in that moment to say yes? Because it's unfair to them and it's unfair to you. And I want your experiences to be positive. So one of the second things to remember, too, is that in BDSM culture, you can ask for references. Like, I think that's hard for people to process. But, like, you can be like, I really want to play with you. May I speak to your former play partners or your current play partners and ask about your reputation, please?
Oh, yeah. And if a Dom screws up, the community will let you know if you're thinking of playing with them. They will publicly blast them. Like, there is like, you get like a pass like for a basic infraction, but if you do it again, you're done.
Oh no, the very first party I ever went to, I was introduced into the community when I was like 21. I was a complete virgin and had no sexual experience, no experience with BDSM except through novels, which I thought was the only way to experience poly and BDSM. And I met this leather woman who'd been in the community for 30 something years, one of the first women in San Diego County to be allowed by gay leather men into the community, because BDSM was primarily started in gay male leather. And and then they allowed heterosexuals, and then now it's like everyone and everyone's mom. But she brought me to my very first party, and the first thing she said was, they're unsafe to play with, they're safe to play with, they're unsafe to play with. And she told me why they were unsafe. And that's why the two philosophies, the risk aware is the counter to the safe, sane, and consensual, because safe, sane, and consensual says that you should only conduct yourself in things that are probably safe. But risk aware kink says, I could possibly die and I'm going to do it anyways. And that's a little bit of the controversy with the philosophies. I mean, the play that this person was involving themselves with was actually putting their submissives in baths of water and then using electrical toys on them. So like so you're talking about stuff
that's a little hardcore even for me. Jesus.
So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff where I'm like, okay, I get, might have a death wish and everything, but I don't really want to, that's not how I want to go out. You know what I'm saying? So
imagine
that's just something.
The coronary report.
Right. We're laughing, but gosh, if they under
I know. God. Yeah, I remember there's always someone out there way more fucked up than you.
Seriously. Somebody asked me recently, is there any kink that has ever made me feel like, even for me, like, oh my gosh? And I'm going to be honest, probably not at this point, but I'm sure there's somebody out there who's going to make me go, I'm sorry, what now? What?
Have you ever had like an awkward or like funny experience?
You mean like during a scene or? Yeah. I mean,
or at an event.
I've had ridiculous scenes for sure. Oh man. Well, okay. So first of all, I'm a completely rebellious, bratty, like bottom. Like I'm a masochistic, bratty bottom. And it comes from the fact that I'm completely dominant in every part of my life except this one, where I'm like, somebody take control, because I don't want to do it right now. And I remember it was a weird little contraption where one half was a barred fence and then the other half was like a St. Andrew's cross, but it was attached and you could climb up the like crisscrossed version, and I remember being tied up to it and then being able to climb up it slowly as my like top tried to like flog me, and I got away and I climbed to the top and I was like, I am the queen of the submissives, and it was really funny and ridiculous. I think the reason I want to express especially that story is just that, like, it's fun. Like, there's every time I bottom for someone, I'm like, do we want to laugh during this scene? Because I will rebel. Do we want to cry during the scene? Because I will rebel. Do we want to, like, what do we want to do? Because it's all about creating that, like, positive atmosphere. And in the end, you always want to feel better than when you started. So that's one of my favorite, just like ridiculous. Man, there was a sawhorse that I dragged across the play floor because I was like, don't hit me, don't hit me, don't hit me. Because even though I enjoy the masochism and the adrenaline rush and the everything, there are still those moments where like it's kind of scary not seeing what's about to happen, even though you know what's about to happen. And so my brain panics and I'm like, I will get away from you. And that's what makes the scene funnier. And then, of course, if you're in a room like I am, usually there's 80 people watching you, which is intimidating. Which is what I try not to focus on because I'm actually not an exhibitionist, which is hilarious because I think a lot of people assume, too, if you're in kink, you must be an exhibitionist. But I'm actually not. I'm a voyeur, but I'm not. I actually don't get off on people watching me. I'm actually kind of nervous about it sometimes.
That's funny. I just have this image of you.
Seriously. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Like, if I could count the times I've laughed just until I was crying from the laughter, it's amazing. It's a really positive community if you find the right one, obviously.
That's pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
Someone put, do all submissives like pain? No, in short.
Oh, gosh, no. Even, I mean, there are submissives who are just service-based. And that's, like, I'm a horrible service submissive. Like, I am the brattiest. You want me to go get you?
Here's your coffee, bitch!
Like, seriously. Like, if they, you know, and I love it when I do it right, because I'm a perfectionist, but most of the time I end up, like, being sassy. Like, I'll bring them a glass of water with an M&M in it. And, you know, just, like, I'm really bad. But there are people who just want to do the service submissive. I think people forget, like, BDSM, because it's associated with sex, you focus on the end being an orgasm. But if you're service submissive or you're not into pain, the focus is about just being somewhere different than the pressures of life in a sober, consenting way and allowing you a moment of giving of yourself and also receiving. And it's about comfort and intimacy. It's not always like that, but I think for a majority of people, that's what they're seeking, is sort of a place to be.
Yeah, for a lot of people who don't know, like BDSM, when you take away someone's senses, be it a blindfold or be it restraining them or whatever, the other sensations involved in the play get heightened. So a simple like finger down the back of the spine can feel 20 million times more intense. So that's why a lot of people start experimenting with it. Let's talk headspace. This is something that was not in the questions, but I think it's pretty important to talk about. Do you want to describe it?
If you mean the headspace of the scene or the subspace of the aftermath. So people
and the come down.
And the come down. So people create a headspace when involved in a scene. A scene is a span of time with a beginning and an end. There's an exchange of power in between the scene. And the concept of the scene is, well, it's dependent on the subjects, honestly. You negotiate. So let's say the height of the scene is to make your submissive cry, break down, and build them back up. So you would do whatever you need to do for that particular person's like needs, and you would bring them up into the headspace where subspace is a description of complete euphoria, essentially, where you feel like you're completely just floating and the rest of the world kind of disappears. Not everyone feels like they've experienced this, but I think as long as you're in a positive enough headspace where it definitely feels like you're involved in the intimacy of a scene, then it feels to who you are euphoric. And then the come down is the hardest part because you don't know that it's happening because it's actually like a physical sensation. Your body is literally reacting to the crazy adrenaline rush and drop. So we call this subdrop. And this happens, it can happen within the first 24 hours. Or if you're me, sometimes it would happen like 72 hours later when I had a moment to sit down because I would play on a Wednesday night and go to work Thursday morning and work Friday and then finally have Saturday off. And then I would sit down and with tears and just be like, what is this? And it was my body just putting the pressure somewhere. And obviously tears are the best place for Brittany to floods everywhere. And that is a thing that can be sort of helped and avoided with aftercare. Should I explain aftercare?
Yeah, you probably should.
So aftercare is the negotiated taking care of the people involved in the scene after the scene is finished. And this is totally subjective. So example, I wear certain clothes. I have a blanket around me. I sit. I usually eat a bunch because, oh my gosh, I just exerted all this energy. Like, give me a hamburger.
Cheesecake.
And literally, and usually BDSM events will have a table full of food for this reason. And they'll drink tons of water, stuff like sugar, stuff like that. Now, your top and your doms also need aftercare, and theirs is specified based off of them. Now, some people, their aftercare is no aftercare, which is really hard for people to understand. But some people will finish a scene and then just go right into socializing, and that's great. I'm a puddle after a scene, no matter how like intense it is or not intense. I'm just like, I'm a mess. Somebody cuddle me, and it feels good. It's just it's like getting therapy with a hug. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. No, Kelly, have you got any thoughts so far?
No, I'm learning a lot, actually.
Good.
I have very basic knowledge beforehand, but I've learned so much already.
Yay!
Kitty is way more fucked up than I initially thought.
Nah, I knew you were always fucked up.
Yeah.
Well, I always say the irony of the scene is that I think people imagine the type of person who could be involved in this without understanding that, like, first of all, it's expensive as heck. So if this is your lifestyle, you're making money. Like, even if you're making, you know, there are levels of money, but if you're especially a dom and you've got toys and a somewhat dungeon or a nice bed, like, you're bringing in, like, where's my paddle? Like, I know I have toys around here somewhere. Like, that stuff costs from $60 to $300, $400. Even in kink events, like BDSM events in Seattle, like, I pay a membership of $60 a year and then like $20 every event I go to. And if I'm going to, you know, and if I'm going to an event every day, that, well, I'm not a young, struggling 20-year-old anymore. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, that's not a big, but like, if you're a 20-something-year-old who $20 is your food for the week, it's like, which is why you find yourself a dom to play with who gets you in.
Yeah, there's also something I want to point out that I've already forgotten mid-sentence. So that's great.
Oh, no.
Some events are more expensive than others. Jesus, what was I going to say? It was really important as well. God damn it. All right, well, I'll probably remember it as soon as we stop recording. So that'll be great. All right, let's move on to polyamory. It's something I'm not familiar with. I am a jealous motherfucker, basically. So it is not for me. One of the questions we've had is actually relating to that. How do you, well, first of all, describe polyamory. That would probably be a good place to start.
So polyamory is different from swingers and even open relationships, though they can all coincide and overlap. But polyamory is the description of having more than one romantic partner at the same time, which is very hard for people to wrap their brains around. And people experience poly in different ways and express it in different ways. But imagine having two girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever that you love so much that they are equally important.
Yeah, absolutely. With me, I'm jealous. Like, yeah.
That was a big question. It seems like whenever people talk about polyamorous relationships, that jealousy is really usually a huge question. How you deal with that sort of jealousy.
So my philosophy in life, because jealousy is not an emotion I quite feel often, is that it can be solved. It comes from a place of fear and possessiveness, and those aren't negative things at all. I don't think jealousy is a negative feeling. I think it's a reactive and an instinctual feeling for a lot of people, and especially in the way that we've been trained with monogamy being the sole thing. It's weird for me to I've been consumed by this culture for so long. Sometimes I forget how people use different words. Like someone said sub the other day, and I was like, oh, submissive, and they're like substitute, and I was like, oh. My bad. So in polyamory, when people talk about what cheating is, or in monogamy with people, like in monogamous relationships, texting someone could be cheating. And that that mindset is so weird to me, because I'm like, I'm sorry, what now? Because I don't think about it anymore. But what it is, it's a negotiated relationship. That's all it is. So if you want to be monogamous, you should be monogamous. If you want to be polyamorous, you have to learn that the jealousy is most likely a condition of your environment telling you should be jealous, when in reality, if you want this, then you should be able to move past those feelings eventually. Now, I think what people forget is time is an issue. That's where the jealousy, I think, stems from a lot of poly relationships, is I don't see Joe enough, and Joe's always with Cindy, and I want more time with Joe, and, how do I do this? You plan. You literally take a planner, and you go from 3 to 4, I get Joe.
I think you answered like 3 of the questions we had.
In like one sentence.
Yeah. They all coincide though, and it's so weird because people don't think about it. And again, you can do different types of poly. There are open poly relationships and closed poly and triads and all of these like 4 weird things. Like I was part of a 4 poly family unit, and I was only dating one of those people, but sleeping with all of everyone because, like, why not foursomes? But it's interesting because the intricacies of planning our days. One of us was, a doctor. One of us was working 80 hours a week. One of us was, what it came down to was having like weekly meetings where we're like, what are we all doing this weekend? Are we going camping? What are we doing? And the reason that really fell apart is because one of the people involved wasn't really poly, and they were jealous, and they wanted more time, and they were doing it because they thought their partner wouldn't be with them if they weren't, and they were right. But like, it's important because for some people they need it, and for others they don't. And don't force yourself into a lifestyle where you can't do it. There's nothing wrong with being monogamous. Yeah, and polyamory is a lot of work.
I'm selfish poly. Like I want her and her and her and him. But they can't have anyone else.
So that is a thing, and that is a type of poly that like I can't do, but that's because nobody gets that much of my time. But like some people want that, and some people make it work. I call it the center of attention poly.
I like that. I kind of like the selfish. The fact is, I don't have enough time for more than one anyway. But
that's another thing too. I think people, even now that I'm single, everyone's like, oh, like how many, like, are you dating everyone? And I'm like, girl, I work 80 hours a week. If I can find one person right now that's down with that, I would be happy. And then they can have other partners. And that's another thing too. You can be polyamorous and only be dating one person, and they could be dating other people. It doesn't mean you need to have 4 girlfriends, which is, I think, hard for some people. They feel pressured, like they have to be counted as poly.
So basically every relationship is different, and you just have to talk and communicate. I think with any kind of alternative lifestyle, sexual or not, communication really is the key of making things work.
Honest communication.
And it has to be honest. You have to kind of suck up your pride and lose that kind of taboo bashfulness. It's really funny. Like, I find it harder to talk about vanilla sex than I do kinky sex, because you get so used to discussing everything you like so openly but when it comes to normal stuff, you're like,
Somebody actually asked me the other day if I have non-kinky sex, and I was like, what does it look like? Because it's been a really long time. I don't know. Yeah, I was like, whoa, no.
Hard limits, vanilla.
It's not that. It's funny too, because I genuinely, like, I'm trying to think of what it was like to have vanilla sex, and I had one partner that was vanilla my whole life, like adult life, and I'm sitting here like, the sex was often, but I don't remember it being very good because it wasn't, in the end, exactly what hit my positive brainwaves. But it wasn't bad sex. It just wasn't. There was something always missing.
That's always a problem. Like, if you start getting into BDSM, it's very hard to leave that from your life and go into a normal vanilla relationship, because you're used to all those extra sensations, that extra stimulation, those things that you didn't think you could feel. Like, you thought you knew what an orgasm was before, but holy fuck, this is way more intense. And so you see it a lot, especially in the BDSM scene. People that are in it when they're younger, they go away, and then you see them pop up again, 35, 40, they're divorced, they try to do the proper, wife, kids, suburban, lifestyle, and it didn't work for them. So that is a warning. Like, if you do kind of go into BDSM, but you want to live a very traditional life and have the perfect little boxes lifestyle, just be aware.
It is a lifestyle. Like, I think people forget, like, there is a difference between being kinky and being in BDSM. Like, you can have a foot fetish, which is kinky as hell, but like, it doesn't mean you're in BDSM, right? Yeah. So there are variations, and there's a line, just like gender orientation or anything else at this point. Like, there's a spectrum, and you just got to find out where you land and then kind of go with it and enjoy it. It's all an adventure.
Yeah, and some of this is what I was going to mention before. Like, some clubs you'll go to, especially BDSM, and there'll be people dressed up like to the hilt in latex and huge, very expensive costumes and outfits and things like that. Don't get intimidated by it. Every community is more of a fashion show than anything. But I hear a lot of people talking bad. Oh, that one's just a fashion show. So what? Go have fun.
I was going to say there's so many variations of expression in the community, and I think that's why I like living in Seattle, is because you can go to every, like, name a kink, think about a BDSM focused orientation, and you'll find a party for it here. Like, it's kind of amazing. There are parties that are just about masturbation. There are parties that are about couples. There are parties that are just about masochism. There's parties, like, it's kind of amazing. And I think it's incredibly wonderful because it gives people an opportunity to express themselves. Like, I love dressing up for it, but I also dress in things I can take off easily, because I always, as a bottom, you always mostly end up naked because it's easier to hit somebody without clothes on.
It happens. Oops, where did that go? But well, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But as always, our viewers ask us questions as well, but I think we can answer those because they're not BDSM related. We can answer those another time. One thing I do want to add, as we were talking about BDSM, we've touched on sex and things like that. Like, if someone is starting to get into sex toys, what do you recommend for them?
Oh gosh, like BDSM sex toys or regular sex toys or anal?
Vanilla, straight up.
So I have a whole review series where I review adult toys for people. And if you're getting started, if you go on Amazon, there's a vibrator called the Halo, which is the best vibrator for just clitoral stimulation that I've ever found. If you're a guy and you have a penis, there are specific, or if you're just a person with a penis, there are specific toys you can use that are like prostate focused or shaft and balls focused that are pretty good. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but a Pink Bob is an independent sex company. It's like pink, and then it's like boyfriend operated
we'll link
system.
it in the description.
Yeah, like they have really good toys for people with penises. But Halo is my favorite vibrator. I'm not working for the company. I just recommend it because what's the big one? The one that everyone, the Hitachi
magic wand. It's way too intense.
Burns my clit. Like, no, I refuse. So the Halo is a good. It's half the price, and it's the best.
Do you want to know something tragic? I have a Hitachi magic wand, and I've never once used it sexually. It's always on my back, my hip flexors.
It's so
like
big.
My neck. Yeah, and I have the control dial that you can attach to it, so I can literally get down my back. And of course, anyone walks in my room, it's the first thing I'm seeing. I'm like, that is not used for what you think it is. Those are in that drawer.
I know. As a submissive, if anyone ever wants to torture me, they bring out that, and I'm like, no, please, anything but that. And like, it's really extreme.
It's
really
so good on the bottom of your back, though. Like, nothing works as well on my back as.
For once, it's being used as a massager.
I know the irony, right? With all the stuff, like I get a Hitachi magic wand, and it never gets used for what you think it's being used for.
Well, right on.
It's amazing. But yeah, those are pretty, I would like, having turned that even just a quarter of the way up, that thing's intense. Like, I can put it on my back and I can feel it like all throughout. I don't think I'd want that pinpointed on my clit. I think it would just numb it.
It does. It literally does. If you're going to use it, please wear underwear or shorts or jeans.
The first time I used it, I did it the hardest mode. And then I was like, you know what? I probably shouldn't do this because it just completely numbed me after a while.
Yeah, I imagine it would because it's so powerful. Like, I dislocated my hip last week, which pulled like down here. That happens almost daily. It's not a big serious thing. And like, I put the Hitachi on it and it was like my thigh was like vibrating, and it was like, it was round here. I'm like, Jesus, you need Kevlar to protect yourself from this. But
I love it.
Yeah. Oh God, it's awful. So if you're interested in a BDSM, go check out Brittany's channel. It's linked in the description. You can YouTube search her for Brittany Simon.
And the sex toy reviews.
And the sex toy reviews. I actually watched one the other day. Was it Adam and Eve? Please be the correct one.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're awesome.
Yeah. And I believe the Adam and Eve one has a coupon code in the description. Yes. Coupon code Brittany, I think 20% off one item plus free shipping. That's from memory. Pretty good. I haven't watched it. I watched it like literally as it went up. Yeah.
And they have like, if you watch back on all the reviews I've done of their toys, like they have some that I call like the Miracle Orgasmer. Like, you should definitely go check out those reviews if you're looking for sex toys. Because oh my God,
the bendy thing.
It's the one with the triple, so it gets your bum and insertable and your clit at the same time, and it's like, it's magical. I cried. I literally Snapchat me crying after like 10 orgasms. I was like, this is a miracle. It was beautiful.
I'm a typical guy, like 2 orgasms, I roll over and fall asleep. I'm like, see ya.
I'm just selfish. I'm like, let's get to 20.
Up, make a sandwich, and then go again.
That's how I am too. I'm just like, all right, nap time.
Yeah. Do you have any questions, Kelly?
I had one more poly question. Are there poly families that sort of raise children together?
Oh yeah. I've met a few, and they seem to be going okay. Keeping it small and knit is probably the best way to go. I can actually give an author as an example. So Laurel K. Hamilton was my first introduction into kink and poly. She writes 2 series, Mary Gentry and Anita Blake, and she started in the 80s with female protagonists, and she actually worked with Marvel to even turn her book into a comic. But her real life situation is actually that she's poly. She's been in a 4-person poly family for a billion years, and she has a child, and they all kind of like, it's her child, it's obvious, but then there's like, she calls it the extra people in the house. So like if she's sick, her husband's sick, it's okay, Auntie M is here, and Auntie, there's other people to help, and they kind of see it as a community effort. But it's odd, like, it's in poly households, it's not like 20 people are the parents, it's more like Joe and Cindy are having a baby, or Cindy and Susan, but we all help raise this baby because it's a family effort. But it's, again, we all know who mom and dad are, mom and mom are, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. One other thing is we've seemed to have covered everything from a sub perspective. If there was a question, oh gosh, whoever wrote this question, I'm sorry, I can't understand. How do you introduce kink to a partner who may not be into it?
So this is like the number one question I get. And genuinely, if you have relationships like I do, it's, hey, so I read this thing on the internet and I think it sounds really sexy. Thoughts? Like,
that's really good.
But if you're living in a relationship where it could be a deal breaker and you're afraid of really scaring them, I would sit them down and be like, hey, so you know that movie like 50 Shades of Grey, which is, I hate to reference it, but it's a good reference. Okay, so I kind of want to do that maybe, but like different. And kind of move them in on it, because I think it's a matter of relating it to something they understand and can conceptualize, and then bringing it into how it would work for your relationship. Or you can literally try the sexy route and get on top of them and be like, you know what would be really sexy? Your hand in my hair while I scream your name. Like, you know what I'm saying? You know your partner better than I'm ever going to know your partner. So you need to talk to them in the way that they can take it and understand it and not get defensive. Because it sounds a little bit to people's brains, especially with poly and kink, like, I'm not good enough, our relationship isn't good enough, you want to change our relationship, but that's not what's happening. Imagine it as, I want to bring this amazing, awesome thing that will have me weeping in a puddle in your arms in the most glorious of ways. And like make it the most positive experience, because it's a change, it's not an upgrade or a degrade, it's more just like why wouldn't you do it?
You have to keep, like, a good relationship has to keep the sex good, and it has to keep it not the same old shit every day. It has to be fresh. Otherwise, you're both going to get bored.
Basically. And it's fun. It's like, who else are you going to explore these amazing things with except your partner in crime? Like, out of all the people in the world you should be able to come to and talk to about this thing, shouldn't it be your partner in crime? Like, I kind of feel like you should be choosing people that you're comfortable talking about these things with.
And the other thing I want to talk about is we've taken most things from a sub perspective. What about a dom who perhaps has sadistic tendencies or whatever and is looking for somewhere to learn? Now, in the UK, we have kind of seen elders that doms can go and talk to about safety and things like that. But I don't know how it works in the US. And I think that could be something important for viewers to know.
So in the US, it's a little fluid. Traditionally, you are supposed to find a mentor. And the reason that being a dom is so much more, like the learning process is critical, is because you are possibly going to murder someone without knowing it, because you're inflicting pain upon them that is like dangerous. Like, you know how whips are completely like sexualized and brought up as like, this is what BDSM is? If you use a whip, you actually like have taken classes and you have medical understanding. Like, handling a whip is so dangerous that most people don't do it. It's floggers and things like that are a little bit more open. But if you're hitting someone wrong, if you're kicking someone wrong on the spine, which I've seen at an event and people had to stop it, they don't, you have to learn. So find somebody who's been in the community. A lot of people get creeped out because these old people are hitting on them. Guys, these old people who've been in the scene for 30 years, they're your bread and butter. They're the people who have They are their experience. And most of the time when older people want to play with you, it can be void of sex. One of my favorite partners is into his 50s because he knows what he's doing, and it's wonderful and it's safe. And I think that's what people have to understand. So if you're a person who thinks you might be a dom or you want to top people, take a few medical classes, take a few like needles classes, take a few like the anatomy of the body, and then go meet some people at Munches who have been in the scene long enough who can kind of guide you through it. Like I said, the community is very friendly and they will welcome you in, but experience is going to be your best friend. I've had doms who are like 3 months in and they come up to me and
so cute.
Well, they they're new because, the first thing they do is they're like, oh, are you a little? And I'm like, no. And I'm like, why would you assume that? And they're like, you have a Disney tattoo. I'm like, bad assumption. And then I'll talk to them and like, I really want to play with you. And I'm like, okay, great. What's your specialty? What do you know? What's your skill set? I don't really know much yet, but I'm figuring it out. And I'm like, okay, dom and sub are job titles. It means you know, or at least understand the responsibility you're taking. A top and a bottom have the luxury of kind of experiencing different sensations and power exchange in a span of time, beginning and an end. It could be something as simple as wax play, kissing, and maybe some spankings. But a dom and a sub actually there's protocol involved in energy and a responsibility, and there's something a little bit more. It's not like it's not that it's better or worse. It's just that it's different, and you have responsibility to that person past a scene space, which is why it's so important that if you're going to do this, you have to think about that person's feelings past the scene. And you have to, you have to really take responsibility for you and the person who's looking for you to take responsibility of them, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
I can rant about
needles.
This for hours.
I cannot. Like if I ever go to an event and someone's got needles in their boobs or anything, they could have the best rack in the world, but I have to look away.
And that's the thing. Like in Seattle, we have that's considered a hard limit in most parties, but they have specific parties for like needles and hooks and stuff. And
nope.
Nope.
I lived in hospital for many years as a kid because I was sick. So for me, like needles is just like, it's purely medical. Like I struggle with the medical fetish because I'm like.
Yeah, there are a lot of doctors in the scene who actually get frustrated because people will be like, oh, you're a doctor, do this on me. And they're like, it's my job. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? It's part of my normal life. There's nothing fetishy or kinky or it's going to get me off in that. All it's going to make me do is be grumpy and need more coffee.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't do anything you're not comfortable with. Don't do anything that you don't know how to do. Even with a flogger that looks as simple as anything, you can really damage someone's kidneys or back or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. And pretty much just, be patient. I know people really want to delve in, especially you mentioned submissives who are in that headspace and maybe they just want to jump right into it. Think about what you're doing. And as a submissive, can I just say this? If you're going to be a bottom or a submissive, I want you to have power first before you give it up. So you know what you're giving up. I want you to know what it's like. That doesn't mean you have to top or bottom or top or dom people. It means you have to know what it's like to be on your own, to have your own money, to have your own space. Like I know so many 18-year-olds that go right to from mom and dad's into their dom's house and they've never had independence. And like, if you don't know what that's like, you don't know that that's really what you want, in my opinion. And as somebody that like lives on her own and pays her own goddamn bills, like I will tell you, I would never give this up. But I'm happy to be a collared submissive when I find the right person. That doesn't mean I have to give up this kind of stuff because it's still my bread and butter. I still have to pay, I still have to survive past my scene life.
And let me tell you, as a sub, like it helps the dom know if you are honest and open with what. Don't feel like you're demanding anything. It helps the dom give a better scene. It helps us know, that we're not going to traumatize you in some way. Something that could be really basic for 99.9% of the community may be a trigger for you for something. So that communication helps both sides. It's not demands. It's more a map.
Can I say one more thing?
Go for it.
People will say, my dom really wants me to do this and I feel like I have to. the truth is that the dom doesn't want to traumatize you any more than you want to be traumatized. I think doms will say things like, you'll meet a masochist or a sadistic dom and he'll say like, I'm going to torture you so much you're going to cry for days. That's just like kinky talk for most of us sadists and masochists. But they don't really want to fuck you up because they really want you to come back to them and be a normal person.
When I next see you, your ass is going to be black and blue.
Like, you know what I mean? That's just like, are you talking dirty to me right now? Like, are you flirting with me? But that's, you know, that's something that's fun because it's what we want. And if it, for whatever reason, really will traumatize you, then opt out of it, and that's okay. And you don't have to feel pressured. I think I recently saw on Tumblr, there were people who felt they weren't good enough because they weren't bruising well enough. And I sat there like, no, stop it. You do not have to have the same bruises as other people. Bruises are just it's your body reacting to, obviously, the pain inflicted. But stop holding your kink up to other people's and stop assuming that, like, your body must react like other people's bodies. It's such a...
I've more bruised than most subs just from walking around.
But seriously, everyone's bodies react differently, and I don't want people thinking that they have to hold themselves up to another person's perceived standard. Does that make sense? You know...
Yeah, you can't compare yourself. Everyone's journey is different. Everyone's likes and dislikes are different. Every dom is different. Every sub is different. You could have a BDSM relationship with one person and have something that's a complete 360 BDSM relationship with another. There aren't two people. You can't have the same chemistry, and thus you can't have the same scene with two people.
We didn't even talk about switches, so we'll have to do that next time.
Yes. I guess we could. Kelly, do you have to run off anywhere? The storm seems to have calmed down. We haven't talked about switches.
Well, I was going to say, one of the switches are kind of the bisexuals of the BDSM community. Yeah. That's how I like to perceive them, is that they can switch from top and bottom. Most do not switch from dom and sub because, again, dominant and submissives are often like roles, and they're consistent after a scene. So if you're like a collared submissive, it would be very hard to then put on a dom hat and be like, I am a dom with a collar, and like I follow different masters, and like that would be difficult. But you can be a top and a bottom and switch consistently. I know switch couples that switch during scenes on each other, and like it's really in the fight for power.
The ultimate head fuck. I'm sorry. No, I am.
I want to have a TV show where it's like top beat top and like switch beat top, like it's just so funny. But switches are just people who can go between the mindsets and who derive different pleasure from different things. Like I'm a bottom and I'm a pretty solid bottom, but sometimes on a rare occasion I'm like, I want to top this person in this particular way, and it's just a derive, and it's an expression that comes from an exchange of power. That's what BDSM is, and it's an exchange of power. So that can come in so many different forms. So if you identify, if you come to the scene, you don't know what you identify as, no problem. Because a lot of it is figuring it out and experiencing different things. That's why actually a lot of doms will bottom for years before they know. They'll experience the things they want to put their submissives through so they know. Most of the doms that I know were mentored by doms who made them bottom for them first. So they understood what was happening, and they understood how to throw a flogger correctly and how to hit someone with a paddle correctly. So don't worry too much about that. But switching is fun. I think it's a great exploration into self, and I think it just opens you up to more options, honestly. Does that make sense? I know, Kelly, since you're kind of new to all of it, am I explaining it in a way that's...
Yeah, no, you're explaining it perfectly.
Okay. And you'll often find like people will have like switch, and they'll be like predominantly dominant switch or predominantly submissive switch.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Things like that.
This is true. This is definitely true. It's actually amazing how it happens too. And it can be all genders and all ages and all like perceived people. There's this couple that I remember my very first BDSM party. She was a 5'2" little woman, and her husband was like over 6 feet, and she tied him up, put a bag over his head, and they kicked him in the balls for half an hour. And I sat there and I was like, oh my God. You see her and you see him, and before they start the scene, you're like, I know who the submissive is, and then it starts and you're like, I was wrong. It's kind of like this great, like you just never know what's gonna happen. It's like a mystery box. I love it.
Crazy. That's funny though. I remember I'm trying to think, I won't mention the name, but I went to an event once, and I opened a door in the event, which is risky because you never know what you're going to get if it's like a door without a thing. And the first thing I saw was rubber sheets, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not going to go in here. Then I see giggling like 5 subs on the floor throwing food at each other. And I had just walked in on a food place scene, and I just was like, cool. I just walked out. But that was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. But you never know. I don't know.
It's very texture based. It's a texture thing sometimes for a lot of people.
I was more horrified that cheesecake looked really good and they were wasting it.
That cheesecake. That should be the cleanup, is they have to eat it off the floor. Is that too mean?
Yes. No, that's good.
Here is a spoon.
You don't need the 5-second rule. It's good.
You were so nice. I'd make them do it with their mouth. Like, no spoon.
A spoon.
A spoon. A spoon. Oh, that's beautiful. Fight over it.
But yeah, well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed the first episode of Real Talk. I think we're going to wrap it up, but I think we'll get Brittany on at some other point, because no doubt all of you who didn't ask your other questions will probably get through. So we'll probably revisit this at some time in the future. Do we have anything to add, Kelly?
No, thank you so much for joining us. You were just so informative. Like I said, I learned a lot. You explained everything super well.
I'm super glad we found you, because it's hard to find someone that's relatable on camera. Something like that. But yeah, thanks for coming on. Guys, go check out Brittany's channel if you want to know more. And we'll put the links to various whatever we spoke about in the episode in the description, as well as Brittany's channel. And we hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what you think, and let us know if there's any more topics you want covered on Real Talk.